Hello, everyone. Good morning. Yes. So, in the last sessions, we have seen about like how we can make a use of get method and delete method, HTTP get and HTTP delete. Let me try to have a quick recap for all those things what has been done so far. So, basically, if there is an external application, and let's say if that application would requires, in a way, let me try to draw a small diagram. So if this is an external application over here at this end, and this application, by the way, wanted a certain amount of records from the Salesforce object, if this is that Salesforce object. So because this is inside one or whereas this is an external application, how would this application would get something from an object? So that is the reason, for which we have written something called as a web service. So web service is that facility which would take this input, understand it, and accordingly it goes to that object, right? It would fetch everything from here. So this type of method would called as get method. Why? Because it is getting the data from the Salesforce object and then it would transfer it to the external application. That was about what? That was get method. The second method what we have studied was, let's say if this application, if there is a record inside an object, if this is a record, if this is an external application, this is an external application. Via this application, if we wanted to delete this record, via this application, if we wanted to delete the record, how we are going to facilitate that? So for that, we came to know that yes, HTTP has a method called as a delete method. So you have created a web service by using HTTP delete method, which would take that ID as a parameter, or maybe a name as a parameter, or maybe a phone number. It could take anything, all right? It could take anything. Don't just think like it's always require an ID. Usually it is ID. Usually it is ID. But that does not mean even if you would supply the name, we can fire the query against the name. We can fire the query against the number. We can fire the query, let's say we have a unique identity field such as Aadhaar card number, a PAN card number. Understood? So based on whatever the unique identity field we have, we can fire a query. We can design an SQL query accordingly. We can design an SQL query accordingly. We can get those records, and later on we could perform the deletion. That is also has been done. Now what we will be starting by today is, if let's say this external application would send a piece of record, maybe one record or multiple records. If your records are coming up from the external resource, how would you design a web service that could take that as an input and store it? That means insert it. Insert a new data particularly. Insert a new data inside an object of the Salesforce. What is the method for that? So the method is HTTP post method. So HTTP post method is a method that would take an amount of data, some records, maybe one record or more than one record, which are coming as a request from an external resource, and then it would insert all those records inside the Salesforce object. So far what we have, we replicate get operation. We also have replicated DML delete. Now we are simulating DML insert operation. The DML insert operation. How would you insert the record inside an object of the Salesforce by using a web service, right? That is what we are implementing. So for this, we are understanding HTTP post method, right? So that is what is the purpose of HTTP post method. As you can see, it has been written in the theory. By using this method, we can insert either one or more than one records inside in the Salesforce object, right? So whenever we are inserting a record, if we are inserting a record, I just have told you with that diagram that a piece of record or multiple records are coming. So that input should always be in the form of JSON and something called as request body. that input data, that input data, which is called as, sometimes it is called as request body, sometimes it is called as JSON payload, whatever it is. But it's always is going to be in the form of JSON. So always is going to be in the form of JSON. And you know about the JSON. JSONs are always enclosed within curly brackets. JSONs are always enclosed. So that data is always going to be in the format of JSON. We're going to see how it is. But see, the HTTP post method when you are using, that means when you're trying to insert the records inside the Salesforce. When you're trying to insert the records inside the Salesforce, they are, you know, they are under the impression of whatever automation you have. So you also would have to take care of that. And what does it mean? It means, let's say, if I would be inserting a record inside an account object, if I'm inserting a record inside account object, right? I can see that name. I can say, see that name is the only mandatory field. Name is the only mandatory field. So you just have entered the name and you try to save it. You try to save it. And in this case, it has allowed because I probably have disabled everything. But I do remember that we have created a few validation rules, or at least a page. Just a moment. What I'm just trying to say, develop and etc. So there was an account trigger which you can see is already in an active state. But for a moment, let's consider that was inactive. If this trigger was being active, or let me make it active. Let me make it active for a moment. If I would save this. Now, what does this trigger? This is a logicless trigger. So I would have to see for its class. I would have to see the business logic class for that trigger. Account trigger handler is the name of that class, as you can see. So it is making the industry field, the facts field, and the website fields as a mandatory thing. So what would happen is like, if I would go to the count and let's say I would be creating a new record at that moment. I would be creating a new record at this moment. So a name called as Mangesh and I'll just try to save it. You can see that these errors are popping up. Now, why these errors are coming up? Because there is what to say, there is an automation which is working in the backend. This case, it is a trigger. It could also be a validation rule. If not with this, but let's say if you have a validation rule, if you have a validation rule in place, right? If you have a validation rule in place, I would try to make phone as mandatory rule make phone PHO. We know that the fields could be made mandatory by a lot many things, right? So I would be making this blank. Is blank phone is my condition to enter into in this record into this blank phone is that condition to enter into the state of error. And let me check the syntax as well. So there's no error found. Top of the page. No, I wanted this on the field level. Which field? It's a phone field itself. Please enter the phone number. Let's save this. So I have make of certain fields as mandatory. Some of them are mandatory, let's say with the trigger. And some of them are mandatory by using validation rule. So if I would be creating a new record, all right, Mangesh, if I try to save it, it would going to give me this error. I'll make, all right, I would be entering those records. Now when I try to save it, again, it would give me the error. Why? Because it is expecting you to enter the value of phone as well, right? You enter the value of phone and then you would try to save it. So this is another way. You could also make a field required from the page layout customization. That also we know. I can go to edit layout. I can go to the edit layout and any one of the field over here, let's say employees field, right? I can make this as a required So fields could be make required by a lot many ways. That is something we already know. At least there are three of them which I just have demonstrated, right? If I would try to save it now, you can see the employee has become a mandatory field. It's going to give me the error. So when you are inserting the record, particularly when you are inserting the record, or else if you are updating the record, whenever either you are inserting the record or you are updating the record from any source, from whatever the source you are using. See, this thing which I'm telling you right now, this is applicable for the web services. This is applicable when you are performing a bulk insert or update operation. Maybe for that, if you are using a data loader, or maybe if you are using data import wizard, or else if you are using Salesforce inspector, right? Or if you are performing this, let's say if you're performing this from a class, a batch class. So this thing which I am teaching you right now, which I'm telling you right now, and it's applicable in all three of the cases. So whenever if you are trying to insert a record or if you're trying to update a record inside an object of Salesforce, you must have that idea, whatever whatever the business rules are working in the backend, you must have an idea. Now see, as a precautionary steps, there are two things. Either I could design a request which should follow everything, which it should give the value of phone or fax or website or everything what is mandatory. You should, in your request, you should have those things. The second is like, whenever we usually perform that bulk import and export operation, we usually disable every automation out of this. We usually disable every automation. So I would be following that thing, I would go to this trigger. I would make it inactive for a moment at least. I would make it inactive. Now my trigger is inactive. Validation rule, I would make it inactive. I don't wanted this rule to be get applicable, right? And the third thing was about the page layout customization. I would also go to page, and employee field has been something which I made it mandatory. Now I reverted back those settings, right? Now, apart from the name, which is a visual thing, because name is a mandatory field for every case. I mean, for every object, it's mandatory. You don't have any other mandatory. Now, if you try to save something, it's going to get saved, right? So this is what I was trying to make you explain. Before we go, and we could write down a web service class which could try to insert something inside the Salesforce object. So whenever you are inserting something from any of the source, you always would have to make sure that there is no automation which could interrupt this process of insertion or process or updation. You should make sure always. This is one of the practice which everyone follows, but usually people don't taught this in the interview. In the training here, they usually don't taught it. And this said to be like, this is something you should have a common understanding, a common sense type of thing, right? So you should follow these. These are some of the primary checks before we could go and perform an insertion and an updation operation. All right, let's now go with that web service. Let's try to understand how we can create a web service that would insert a record inside Salesforce object. All right, that would insert a record inside your Salesforce object. So we have a use case around create a RESTful web service to insert the account records, right? To insert the account record. I must have a JSON format for this. So I would be considering this as a JSON. Now you can see this JSON. This is a JSON, which is, if you can see the body of this request, there are fields like account name, then the value, account rating, which is hot, industry, phone, fax, and this is that input payload. This has to be get passed. This has to be get passed, and accordingly, we would have to create. For this, we would have to create a record inside in the Salesforce, right? You would have to create a record inside in the Salesforce. So how I'm going to do that? Let's understand. So let me first of all see that inside an account, do we have any such record called as Sunil? Oh, There is no such record. Fine. So let's go to developer console and let's try to understand how we can create that. Let me pick the class name from here. So I would be creating a new class. So I would be creating a new class with the name called New Accounts Manager Services. And let's make this class as a web service class. So the first change what you have to do, you would have to make this class as a global class, because the web services are always have to be global. The rest, resource, SOURCE. Inside in the bracket, give URL mapping equals to, let's have these two symbols and an asterisk at the last of that. Now you can give any nickname to this. You can give any nickname to this. New account services. Right. I can give any name. Try always to give something which seems to be more relevant. Otherwise, you can give it. Now let's design that business logic, and which this business logic would receive that JSON payload. It would convert and store it inside your account object. So for that, I would be creating a class, a method, a global static, and let's give a message as in return. So global static return string insert new. So with this name, I would be creating a method. Now this method has to be annotated with something called as HTTP post. Why? Because the business logic which I would be creating inside, that business logic is responsible to insert a record. So for the insertion, you always have to use HTTP post method. HTTP post method. Now let's come to the JSON payload, and we would going to see whatever is coming from over here, right? So a simple thing what I can do would be like, I can take every field name as a parameter of this method, right? So I would be taking every field name as a parameter string. You can supply another name as well. You can supply another name as well for this. I prefer to copy and paste this string. The second parameter which is coming is this one, comma. It's going to be a lengthy thing, but yeah, this is how we code it. Account industry, ACC industry, string. I would be collecting every field name in a string variable. You can give another name as well. That's not an issue. One second, let me think of this. I guess you can give. We would try. We would try this. I mean, I'm confusing myself, but I guess we can give another name as well instead of giving the same name. We would going to try this. Don't worry. What happens if I would supply another name for this? Or this has to be same with your request, but I don't think something like that. String count ownership, string ACC website. I'm just collecting everything inside a string variable, nothing else I'm doing at this moment. String ACC active, string last one is ACC revenue. All right. Now, once you have collected everything, I would go inside into this block, and now, I would be, ACC revenue is not string; it's a number. So yes, so it's about to make a mistake over here. This has to be, the data type should be decimal because it's not a string. As you can see, this request is coming not inside double inverted comma. So it's a number. It's a number. Apart from that, every other thing is a string. Yes. All right. So that's why, I have taken the last one inside in the decimal. All right. That's good. Now, what I'm going to do is like, I would be simply, just very simple. I would be simply creating an object of sales, of the object of account equals to new account, make it as a default constructor. Now we have an object of account with a name called ACC. And let's say ACC dot name equals to this one. Whatever the parameter, I would be supplying it over here. Next, ACC dot rating equals to this one. And then next, ACC dot, the next is industry equals to this value. The next, ACC dot phone should get the value of this parameter. The next is next, fax. So ACC dot fax equals to, let's copy this one, ACC dot fax. And then next, after fax, it is type. So ACC dot type should equals to this one. And then ownership. So ACC dot ownership should get the value of ACC dot ownership. The next is website. So ACC dot website should get the value of this parameter. The next is priority. So ACC dot, we don't have anything called as priority, I guess. Yeah, we don't have. That would be a custom field probably I have created for the last batch. I would have to remove from here as well. We don't, oh, industry via. We don't have anything, a field called as priority. Don't have a field called as priority. Priority? No, 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 no. Should be there. Should be there. One. ACC thought there's no field called as priority. कुछ तो भी देखे ना अपन ने, हाई मीडियम लो, कुछ तो भी होता है ना यार, फील्ड्स. Is it a custom field? Customer priority, yes. It's customer priority. Let me see the values of that as well. High, low, and medium, yes, of course. So, okay. So we have ACC dot priority, and here it would be ACC dot customer priority should equals to, should equals to ACC dot. Yeah. And then the next is active status. ACC dot active __ C should equals to ACC active. The last one is revenue, which is annual revenue in our case. So it would be ACC dot annual revenue should get the value of this ACC. Now, once you have committed with, once you form the data, once you form the record according to what you have received inside in your request, name, rating, industry, phone, fax, type, ownership, website. Okay. Now we can insert those records. So because we created a record, we'll have to insert it. So I'm making a DML over here, ACC, and let's verify that as well. So if ACC.id, if that is not equals to null, that means the record has been inserted. So if it is not equals to null, we can have a system.debug over here that, or why should I do system.debug? I can directly return that statement. Return message like count inserted. Otherwise, else return insertion got failed. Okay. So I have my return statements as well, and yeah, everything seems to be in place. Now, what we are going to do is we would try to test this out. So how we are going to test it? We would obviously go to the workbench for this. So I'm going to workbench and I would make a login. I mean, if once you logged in, it would automatically take those credentials, right? Otherwise, if it would ask, you can definitely supply them once again. So we are logging into production environment because the developer org which we are working is the production. So I'm going with utilities tab and then REST Explorer. The method which I have created is HttpPost method, and see the difference. I mean, if you would click over here or else if you would click on the delete, right? How does the interface looks like to be? But what happens when you select post? Immediately a request body area, right? A text area immediately get pops up, which doesn't comes in case of get and delete, right? So when you select post, when you select put or patch, you can see this request body. Here you have to actually give that input JSON, right? But before that, let me give the name of your web service class and everything which is required every time. So I would be writing apex rest oblique. Here it is expecting the name of your web service, resource name actually. So new account services is the name which I have given, right? New account services. Now, with this new account services, I would also have to supply the JSON format, right? The JSON, the body of that. So what I'm going to do, I would be copying this JSON from here, this entire JSON. I would be copying and I just would paste it out over here. And we would make this assumption that, yeah, this is that JSON, this is that JSON, which has to be, this is that input JSON payload, the record which needs to be get inserted, right? Let's do that. So let me execute this. So you can see the return account inserted, right? Account inserted. So now you can go to the account, you can click onto the all accounts and if you refresh, and if I go with the recent one, so probably, yeah, Sunil. Sunil is what we have inserted, right? Sunil Hot Technology. Sunil Hot and Technology. Yes, this is that record, right? So previously we don't have this record inside the object. Now you can see it has been inserted. It has been inserted. So this is the way to insert the record using a web service. This is the way how we can make a use of post method. There's one more example over here which I'm giving you as an homework. I don't have much time to explain that. This was about inserting a single record, right? Now, how to do a multiple insertion, how you can insert multiple records. So now see to this that in this example, if you would see, first of all, let's understand the JSON. This is, I'm going to give you a homework, right? I'm giving you this in homework along with all other examples. That's why I am explaining you this. See to this JSON. First of all, see the JSON payload. Whenever it starts with a square bracket, it means there are going to be multiple records of the same type. Whenever it starts with a square bracket represents array, right? Square bracket always represents array. What is an array, by the way? Array is a collection of similar data type. Array is a collection of homogeneous elements. Array is a collection of similar kind of records of same object, let's say. So whenever it starts with an opening square bracket, immediately the thought that immediately that should come into your mind, we are going to see multiple records of the same data type, right? So these are what? These are records of what? Hiring manager object. So you first of all, you would have to go to hiring manager, see for that if you have any field as a mandatory field over there. Maybe if you had created that as a mandatory field by page layout customization by required checkboxes, or maybe with a trigger, or maybe with a validation rule. So you'll have to check it out. Either you can supply those inputs over here, or else you can disable for a temporary for a temporary time, for a moment of time you can disable it over and then come to this request. So there are two alternatives to do that, but you should always check. Now see, these are multiple records. These are multiple records of the same data type. So what we have did in the program is like, we have, I mean, when it was single record, I just have passed it like uh, like parameters, right? But here what we did is like, we don't have supplied anything over here. Rather we have make a use of this, which we already have, right? REST contest dot request. Now instead of params, like REST contest dot request is something, instead of, after that you were being habitual to use the params. So instead of params, I have used another method called as request body. That means request body, when you request the body, immediately this part is something what you would get. And that body to string matlab, they are now converted into string form. They are now converted into string form. So that entire body is over from here to here is being converted into string, and now you have stored it inside a string variable. Because you converted it into string, you were being able to store it in. See, always remember, left side and right hand side data type should always be same. If you would commit anything mistake, if you would make any difference, it's going to throw the error. So right hand side data type and left hand side data type, the container size should always be the same. So that's the reason the request body would give me the body of response, and I have converted it into string. Now I have stored it inside a string variable with this. Once you have that, you simply can make a use of deserialize method. We have used that, right? We have system.json.deserialize. System.json.deserialize. Give the name of your string, and then apex class type. You remember, because it contains multiple records, I have used list of hiring manager dot class. And then I mean, this would give me S object as a data type. We have typecasted this into list of hiring manager. This we did. हमने ये पहले कर चुके हैं. जैसे account dot class अगर आपको याद आ रहा होगा. Here it was account dot class. First of all, name the whole string of JSON input payload, which we have collected inside a string variable, तो उसका नाम दे दिया. Then because it was containing multiple record, अगर एक ही record होता तो हम बस hiring manager dot class लिखते थे, और यहाँ भी hiring manager dot class लिखते थे. But it is not like that. बिकॉज वहाँ मल्टीपल है, तो इसलिए हमने फिर यहाँ पे लिस्ट ऑफ हायरिंग मैनेजर डॉट क्लास और यहाँ पे भी लिस्ट ऑफ हायरिंग मैनेजर. अकॉर्डिंगली फिर इसका रिटर्न टाइप भी सेम रहेगा. अगर ये लिस्ट कलेक्शन रिटर्न कर रहा है तो यहाँ भी लिस्ट ही रहेगा. अगर एक रिकॉर्ड रहेगा तो यहाँ पे एक वेरिएबल बनाते हैं आप. ठीक है. फिर उसके बाद में इफ दिस यू जस्ट प्राइमरी चेक इफ दिस रिकॉर्ड इज नॉट एम्प्टी, इफ दिस कलेक्शन इज नॉट एम्प्टी, यू आर इंसर्टिंग दैट होल कलेक्शन एंड देन यू आर रिटर्निंग अ मैसेज. अदरवाइज कुछ और मैसेज. सिंपल थिंग है. सो गो विद दिस प्रोग्राम. Everything is over here only, and do these whole assignments. Next would be http put method. I guess that's going to be the last one. उसके बाद में मैं postman services कैसे use करते हैं वो मैं आपको बता दूंगा. Oh, patch is there. So put and patch. उसके बाद में I would be explaining you the entire OAuth authentication process. With that OAuth authentication, after learning that OAuth authentication, we would be learning. So ये example वही है जो आप कर चुके हो सारे. अभी just आपने ये वाला example किया. So I'm not going to repeat that example once again. Only thing, हम लोग OAuth authentication को समझने के बाद postman कैसे use करना, we're going to see this. And this everything, I'm trying to wind up in this week only. So I probably could take class up to this weekend, even on the Sunday, because I have planned to take a new batch from the 11th of this month. So that's going to be started Monday, coming Monday. So I would wind up everything within this week only, right? And hardly 2 or 3 or 4 sessions has been required for this topic. That's all for today. You have any questions? Go ahead and ask me. Any questions? Thank you so much.